What if a fire could follow instructions, shaping itself into patterns so precise that even 5 centuries later the walls still remember the heat that carved them? What if a priest in 1471 truly turned to ash mid-prayer, not because the flames consumed him, but because something older than the church demanded a completion he never reached? And what if the burned baptistry he left behind has started warming again, even though the stone is cold to the touch? Before we dive into the story, take a moment to ground yourself, because what you are about to hear comes from preserved accounts that investigators once tried to seal away. The events within these walls unsettled archivists, clergy, and researchers who believed they were immune to superstition. If you feel a slight pressure behind your ears while listening, pause. These details have affected listeners before. And while you are here, tell me the city you are watching from and the exact time you are seeing this, because patterns matter more than you think. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the story. The survey began on a quiet morning in early autumn, when sunlight moved in thin bands across the nave and the old church seemed half asleep. The historian assigned to the task, a reserved man named Rowan, had expected routine documentation. The baptistry had been closed for decades, locked behind a warped oak door that refused to open on the first 3 tries. When the hinges finally gave, the air that spilled out carried the scent of wet stone and something faintly metallic, a smell that did not belong to dust or age. Rowan remembered lowering his lantern, letting its soft glow settle into the room, and feeling as if he were not the first to step inside despite the untouched layer of grime on the floor. The scorch lines were the first anomaly. They curled along the circular chamber like vines drawn in soot, twisting upward toward the vaulted ceiling. Rowan knelt near the largest patch and noticed how the stone beneath it was warped subtly inward, as if pressed by heat that moved with purpose rather than chaos. He whispered to himself, not quite meaning to speak, "Fire does not bend this cleanly." His voice disappeared into the room instead of echoing, as if absorbed. Near the center of the baptistry was the marble font. Once white, it had darkened into a gray so deep it looked scorched, yet the surface remained smooth and cold. Around its base were candle stubs melted flat into the stone floor, their shapes distorted. They looked less like remnants of wax and more like something had pressed them downward with a wide, invisible palm. One stub had hardened in a perfect circle, smooth like a seal. While taking photos, Rowan noticed faint flecks of black drifting in his lantern light. When he reached out to catch one, it disintegrated before touching his fingertips. That was when he saw the pattern on the wall directly behind him. The soot lines converged into a spiral that pointed toward the floor, almost like an instruction diagram. Not drawn, but burned into place. He paused his recorder and leaned closer. The pattern felt deliberate, mathematical, even ritualistic. It reminded him faintly of manuscripts he had seen in the Forbidden Archives, diagrams associated with rites the church refused to acknowledge as real. He steadied himself and turned the recorder back on, only to hear a faint sound layered beneath his own breath. A whisper, thin and trembling, ghosting the edge of the audio. Rowan played it back again. The voice was older, strained, barely more than a breath. "It remembers the prayer." He froze. No one else was in the room. The door behind him was still closed. He tried playing the clip a 3rd time, but the whisper did not repeat. Only soft static remained, followed by the small click of his lantern cooling. That was his first hint that the room might not be as dormant as it appeared. He continued photographing the walls, stepping carefully around the font. When he brushed dust from a section of stone near the left alcove, a brittle fragment broke away and fell at his feet, cracked on impact and released a faint puff of soot. Inside the fragment was something pale and brittle. For a moment he thought it was bone, but when he picked it up, the piece dissolved between his fingers, leaving only a smell like burned linen. He found another fragment near the base of the wall, this one larger. It held the faint impression of a fingertip. He tried to convince himself it was simply old plaster, shaped by time. The impression was too clean, too human. He took a shaky breath and whispered into the recorder, "These pieces, they look like remains." The room stayed silent. At the center of the baptistry, he noticed a faint circular discoloration beneath the font. It was darker than the surrounding stone, almost like a shadow that refused to fade. When he crouched to touch it, he felt nothing out of the ordinary. Cold stone, smooth surface. But as he leaned closer, a tremor ran faintly beneath his palm. Not movement, more like warmth rising from something below. He pulled his hand back quickly. His lantern flickered, then steadied. The shadows along the walls moved a fraction of a second after the flame, as if catching up to the light rather than responding to it. That was when Rowan heard a soft scraping sound from the far end of the baptistry. He turned instantly. No one was there. The room remained still, yet the scraping continued, slow and hesitant, like something testing the floor with careful weight. He lifted the lantern higher. Its light revealed nothing new. Then, from the recorder on the stone floor beside him, a voice whispered again. He did not finish. The words were not Rowan's. They were quiet, thin, and followed by a single crackle, like embers settling in an unseen fire. Rowan backed toward the door, never turning his eyes from the center of the room. The warmth beneath the font pulsed once, like a slow heartbeat rising through the stone. He did not know it yet, but he had just stepped into a ritual that had been waiting for centuries. Rowan returned to the baptistry at dusk, though he could not explain why he felt compelled to come back so soon. The room had lingered in his thoughts all afternoon, tugging at him like an unfinished sentence. He told himself it was simple professional responsibility, that he needed better photographs, cleaner notes, and more disciplined documentation. But when he reached the door, he hesitated, sensing an attention pressing from the other side. The church hallway behind him felt colder the longer he stood still, as if the air itself urged him inward. He pushed the door open and stepped through before he could think of a reason not to. The lantern's halo revealed the same warped stone, the same faint soot spirals curling along the walls. Nothing moved, yet the room felt subtly changed, like a patient who had only pretended to sleep earlier and now watched him without blinking. Rowan kept his breath steady and forced himself to begin a systematic sweep, telling himself that clear procedure would stop his mind from conjuring fears that did not belong here. He started with the candle stubs near the font, lowering his light to capture their distorted shapes. As he leaned close, a cold draft grazed the back of his neck. He turned fast, lantern raised, expecting someone in the doorway. The passage was empty. When he moved the lantern back toward the floor, he noticed that several soot grains he had scattered earlier were now arranged in a thin line that curved toward the center of the room. He had not placed them like that. The nodules pointed directly at the darker ring beneath the font. He knelt, hand trembling slightly, and touched the discoloration again. The stone felt cold, but there was a faint vibration, like a distant rumble hidden deep beneath bedrock. It came in slow intervals, each pulse quieter than a breath yet impossible to ignore. Rowan leaned closer, unsure whether he was listening or being listened to. He started the audio recorder and spoke in a hushed tone. The circular mark appears to emit intermittent vibrations. Unclear source. Not mechanical. Possibly thermal expansion, though the surface remains cold. Halfway through the sentence, the recorder captured something behind his voice. Faint exhale. Not static, not mechanical, but breath. Rowan froze and replayed it. A fragile hush flooded the background of the clip, followed by a barely there murmur, too soft to form a word yet unmistakably human. He swallowed hard, lifted the recorder to eye level, and whispered, "Is someone here?" Silence, but the vibration beneath the stone quickened, almost like a quiet response. He moved on to the alcove, determined to catalog every detail. The soot pattern on the right wall caught his attention again. Under the lantern's new angle, it revealed shapes he had not noticed earlier. Thin, interlocking lines that resembled markings from the forbidden manuscript he had once glimpsed in the archives. A memory filled his mind, unbidden. The cracked leather cover, the diagrams arranged like ritual instructions. A note scrawled in the margin, "When the circle warms, leave." He did not. Rowan wished he had not remembered that line. He lowered his lantern until the glow washed over the spiral. The soot appeared deeper than surface level, its blackness sinking into the stone in uneven grooves. He ran a fingertip across one of the ridges. Felt not like burned residue, but like old scar tissue hardened over time. When he pressed slightly harder, the groove seemed to resist him, almost like skin pulling taut. He jerked his hand back. His breath fogged slightly in the lantern light, even though the room was not cold enough for condensation. The air shifted again, the faint metallic scent rising sharper this time, like heated iron cooling too fast. Rowan took a few careful steps back toward the center, but the shadows around him felt closer than before. Not hostile, but expectant. Then he heard a small crack behind him. He turned slowly. A fragment of scorched stone had fallen from the wall near the baseboard. It lay on the floor, split open, releasing a thin stream of soot that curled upward in a thread-like plume. Rowan crouched and lifted the fragment. It broke into powder between his fingers, but inside the dust was something pale and rigid, shaped like a fragment of a tooth. He felt a sudden pressure in his chest and placed the lantern closer. The piece looked worn, as if it had been exposed to extreme heat. It crumbled to nothing when he tried to lift it. He backed away again. The recorder on the floor clicked alive without him touching it. A sound spilled from its speaker, thin and trembling. A voice breathed out a single line. He tried to turn back. Rowan felt the words crawl down his spine. His rational mind insisted the recorder must have captured an earlier echo, or that he had brushed the activation switch without noticing. But the voice was too raw, too present, as if spoken only moments ago by someone standing a few inches from the device. He crouched, picked up the recorder, and whispered, "Who is speaking?" The machine answered with silence, then a distant crackle, then something like a faint dragging sound that seemed to come not from its speaker, but from the floor beneath the font. Rowan stepped away, lantern shaking in his hand. The vibration from the stone intensified again. A rhythm began to form, slow and purposeful, like something shifting far below the chamber. Each pulse was accompanied by a soft hiss, barely audible but unmistakably real. Rowan pressed the recorder to his chest to steady his grip. He breathed through his nose and spoke the words he wished someone else could say first. "I think something is moving underneath." There was a brief pause after he spoke. a pause in which the entire room seemed to hold still, listening. Then the marble font gave a faint, deliberate click, as if settling under weight. Rowan stared, unable to blink. The base of the font shifted a fraction of an inch. The darkest ring below it brightened into a faint, ember-colored glow. Rowan stumbled backward, his lantern skittering across the floor. The light swung wildly, shadows stretching toward the moving circle like reaching arms. The glow pulsed again, brighter, then dimmed, leaving a single thin wisp of smoke rising from the stone. The smoke curled toward him. It formed a shape that almost resembled a hand. He ran for the door, but the lantern dimmed behind him, and for a moment he sensed something stepping into the space he had just vacated, as if the ritual had noticed him at last. Rowan did not sleep that night. Images of the ember ring, the smoke that shaped itself like a hand, the whisper through the recorder threaded behind his eyes until dawn felt like an incitement. He returned to the church with a different purpose, not documentation but inquiry. He needed context, names, dates, someone with authority to tell him his eyes had not betrayed him. The archivist on duty, Maris, met him at a locked gate and watched his hands shake as he set the recorder on the table between them. "You saw it," she said without preamble. Her voice was quiet, exact. "You heard it." "Yes," he said, "and I think something is under the font." Maris folded her hands. "We have a manuscript in restricted. You should not have seen the ledger, but you did, so we will use it." "Come?" They moved through corridors where the light seemed to avoid corners, into a room of shelves that held the church's secret history. The restricted section smelled of glue and old cloth, a scent Rowan had learned to trust the way sailors trust compasses. Maris produced a book wrapped in oilskin. Its leather was cracked in radial patterns, as if heat had tried to push outward from the spine. No catalog number on its cover, only a single notation in faded ink. For the Baptistry. She opened it with gloved hands. The first pages were not written in a clerical hand. The diagrams sprawled across vellum, lines intersecting in precise spirals, annotations in Latin and a local dialect Rowan recognized from municipal charters. Between two diagrams, a margin note read, in ink that layered like different years, "When the circle warms, leave." He did not. Another hand had scrawled below, "It begins before the stones." Rowan traced the spiral with a fingertip, feeling the roughness of pockmarks in the page. The diagrams matched the soot pattern exactly, down to the tiny notches he had not noticed on the left wall. He read aloud, voice steadying into ritual cadence the way a man recites a poem learned long ago. "Arrange candles thus. Place the font within the mark. Recite until breath thins. Cease not until the ash covers the name." Maris' face tightened. That instruction predates our records. The church was built in 1452. These notes reference a place older than that, a stone circle at the edge of what became the parish. He felt the air in the room thicken. So the ritual existed before the church. Yes. She tapped another page. A ledger entry, dated in a scribbled hand, recounted an event in 1471. A priest consumed by unknown flames mid-prayer. The parish named him Brother Tomas. The language was clinical, almost embarrassed, as if scribes felt the need to record what could not be explained. The margins contained fragments of testimony. Terse. He began to glow. He whispered and turned to smoke. They wrapped him in linen and he scattered like dust. Rowan's throat tightened. The manuscript's diagrams and the parish ledger dovetailed like two halves of a broken tool. If the ritual had preceded the church, what had the builders intended? The baptistry, designed to cleanse bodies, sat atop a circumference that had once been ritual ground. The more they read, the less accidental the placement seemed. Maris leafed through further entries. Every attempt to erase the rite left more traces, she said. Burn a page, and another hand copies the words. Confiscate the book, and a copy appears in a different chest. The manuscript notes this, calls the act preservation. The scribes used the word preservation. Rowan swallowed. So destruction proliferates it. She inclined her head. Records suggest the ritual was not merely practice. It was a loop. Each cycle required one who began and did not finish. That failure, historically, has been recorded as a consumption. The text implies the circle needs completion, and when a human does not complete it, the place completes on its own. A brittle laugh left Rowan, but it had no humor. That sounds like superstition, Maris said. We are only describing what the records say. We have testimony from church wardens, caretakers, even a municipal mason who complained of missing time while repairing the floor. They spoke of dreams shared by the congregation, repeated images of a priest kneeling and the circle closing like a mouth. She read aloud an excerpt from a caretaker's diary dated in careful script, an entry that ended mid-sentence. It spoke at night, the voice under the tiles, and I dreamed of ash. The line stopped, ink fading as if the hand had been interrupted. Rowan closed his eyes and remembered the recorder's whisper, the voice that had said, he did not finish. He forced himself to ask the question that made his stomach hollow. Why would people keep attempting it? Maris set the book down. The manuscript hints at promise. A cure, perhaps, or a preservation of something highly coveted. Past margins name what was sought in one word: continuance. The ritual appears to promise a continuation beyond natural ending. That kind of promise breeds persistence. Persistence, Rowan repeated. The word felt like a hinge opening to a darker room. So the ritual is older, it survives attempts to destroy it. It requires a completion it keeps trying to force, and when the completion fails, he did not finish. When completion fails, consumption follows, Maris said, eyes distant. Records show a pattern across centuries. A candidate approaches the font for a rite, the font reacts, the candidate is consumed or lost to ash or memory. Later, someone claims they heard a voice in the stone, or a witness finds a handprint pressed in plaster. The manuscript insists the place itself keeps attempting reenactment until a human finishes the prayer. Rowan thought of the smoke that had formed a hand and reached. He thought of the warmth under the font, the ember ring that pulsed like a deliberate heartbeat. The archive's lamplight made the paper glow, and for a second the spiral on the page seemed to move beneath his gaze. Maris spoke softly, as if addressing the room rather than him. There are entries that speak of interference, hands that tried to stop the rite. They were struck silent, or they turned away, or they were buried. The manuscript's later notes grow frantic. It records attempts to lock the room, to brick the font, to seal the stones. Each attempt is described with a new footnote. The thing below adapts. Rowan set the recorder between them and, without thinking, pressed play. The whisper from his first visit played, thin and patient. It remembers the prayer, neither moved. The sound mapped into the silence of the archive like a returning animal. When it finished, the only sound was the soft rustle of vellum. Maris closed the manuscript gently and looked up. We can keep this locked. We can catalog it under a false number. We can tell no one. or we can document and warn. But the records show secrecy breeds repetition. Rowan felt the weight of history pressing into the present, ancient insistence against his modern certainty. He realized then that his work would not be tidy. He had opened a ledger that led to more ledgers, a loop that fed on attention. He also understood the thing he had sensed in the baptistry was not only a past event reasserting itself. It was a process patient and iterative that expected, and had always expected, to be finished by a human hand. Outside, the clock in the nave struck, a sound thick and reluctant. The bell's vibration traveled through stone and timber, carrying the same slow insistence he felt in the manuscript, as if the church itself kept time with the ritual it sheltered. They wrapped the book in oilskin again, but the spiral on the exposed page had burned into Rowan's mind in a way no covering could erase. Rowan spent the rest of the morning pacing the archive's narrow aisle, unable to steady the rhythm of his breathing. The manuscript's words were still moving inside him, circling like a quiet current he could not step out of. Maris watched him without interruption, giving him space to settle into whatever realization was forming. But Rowan did not settle. The more he tried to order his thoughts, the more they curved back to the ember ring beneath the font, to the vibration that felt not mechanical but organic, to the whisper that had followed him out of the baptistry. He stopped pacing and faced her. "I need to see the other testimonies," he said. "All of them." Maris hesitated only briefly. Then she retrieved a thick folder bound with twine and set it on the table. When Rowan untied it, the scent of old mildew escaped, along with a faint undertone of smoke. Inside were handwritten accounts from caretakers, notes from priests, fragments of letters, even a half-burned page recovered from a courtyard ash pile. Every voice sounded like someone attempting to describe the same shape of fear without the proper language to capture it. A letter dated in careful script described a sleepless night when the writer kept hearing footsteps circling the baptistry. The note ended with a confession. "I thought I heard a prayer spoken in a voice I did not know. It was as soft as a breath on my ear." Another page contained a short statement from a mason assigned to reseal the floor. He claimed the tiles shifted under his hands, not with movement, but with warmth. He had dreamed of kneeling. He had dreamed of saying a phrase he did not understand. He wrote, "It felt like someone was speaking through my mouth." Rowan's stomach tightened. He set the papers aside and rubbed his eyes. "They all describe the same pattern," he murmured. "Something calling them back. Something trying to continue itself." Maris nodded. "And something using people who do not know they're participating." Rowan exhaled slowly, trying to ignore the faint tremor in his hands. "What if that is happening again?" Maris closed the folder with deliberate calm. "Then the baptistry is active. And if it is active, nothing we do here in the archive will stop it." He knew she was right, yet the thought of returning to that chamber tightened his chest. The memory of the smoke forming a hand lodged deep behind his ribs. Still, he could not look away from the truth forming like a spiral at the center of his mind. He said, "Show me the earliest testimony we have, the one before the church was built." She hesitated, then reached for a thin parchment stored separately from the rest. It was brittle and yellowed, its ink faded in some places and darkened in others, as if parts had been scorched. Rowan leaned in to read. The script described a stone circle at the edge of an early settlement. People gathered there after strange dreams urged them. Voices rose from beneath the stones, promising continuity. A figure attempted a rite, kneeling inside the circle. The air shimmered, The figure began to glow. When the others intervened, he collapsed and disintegrated into drifting ash. Below the description were marks that looked like fingerprints pressed in soot. The circle does not forget. A final line read, "It waits to be continued." Rowan closed the parchment carefully. His throat felt dry, as if he had inhaled dust. The testimonies formed an unbroken chain, each adding weight to the next. He drew a deep breath. The ritual has been trying to finish itself for centuries. Maris studied him. "Do you believe what you saw beneath the font was this continuation?" Rowan nodded. He felt the weight of the admission settle into his spine. "Yes, and I think I interrupted something. Or it noticed me." The recorder on the table flickered, even though it was turned off. A brief hiss of static leaked from the speaker. Rowan froze. Maris slowly backed away. The machine clicked, then played a single phrase, soft and impossibly close. "He is needed." Rowan felt the words like a cold finger against his sternum. He reached forward and switched the recorder off. The silence that followed was too sharp. Maris swallowed hard. The room is escalating. The testimonies warn that once the ritual identifies a participant, it becomes persistent. It adapts to bring them back. And if it cannot bring them back, it brings itself forward. "Forward," Rowan repeated. The idea scraped along his nerves. "You think it could move beyond the baptistry?" She did not answer immediately. "Doors are deterrents, Rowan, not barricades. The ritual is older than stone walls. You told me you felt it vibrating beneath your hand. The manuscripts say the place fits itself to the structure built on top of it. So yes, it can move. It will move if it must." He stepped back from the table, the sense of inevitability closing in like a tightening ring. The manuscript had not been wrong. Attempts at secrecy had only strengthened the ritual's grip. Each witness who tried to hide their experience ended up feeding the cycle through fear, through silence, through the slightest acknowledgement that something had touched them. He whispered, "It is already following me, isn't it?" Maris did not try to comfort him. She only gave a slow nod. "Your presence in the baptistry woke something, and your fear will draw it closer." Rowan rubbed his face with both hands, as if he could erase the tension crawling across his skin. But the unease clung to him. He could feel it now, a low pressure crawling behind his ears, the same sensation he had experienced when he first stepped into the chamber. Something had watched him then. Something still was. He forced himself to stand straighter. "Then I need to face it directly, not alone. We need to study the room, test the circle, measure the heat. We need to know what it wants before it decides to act." Maris did not move toward him. Her expression remained steady, but her eyes had darkened with understanding. "You are assuming it wants something negotiable." He held her gaze. "No, I am assuming it has intent." A faint sound interrupted them, not from the recorder, from deeper in the archive. A slow scraping like stone dragging against stone. It carried through the aisles and settled into the room with a final, deliberate click. Rowan's skin prickled. Maris whispered, "The baptistry is 2 floors above us." The scraping came again, softer now, as if descending. Rowan took a step back, dread thickening the air. Something was coming closer, and it moved like a memory returning to its proper place. The scraping grew louder as Rowan and Maris backed toward the stairwell, but the sound did not move like footsteps. It advanced in steady intervals, each stroke measured, patient, as if something unfamiliar with walking was learning how weight should fall. The archive lights flickered. Dust drifted from the ceiling in thin spirals. Rowan felt the pressure behind his ears intensify until it became a low internal hum, a signal he could not decode. The manuscript's words looped in his mind. The place fits itself to the structure built on top of it. The ritual was adapting. A soft thud came from the far end of the corridor. Another, then a faint hiss, like breath passing through stone. Maris grabbed Rowan's sleeve and whispered, "Do not speak. It reacts to sound." They moved silently, every step calculated. But the thing descending toward them did not rely on noise to track them. Felt intention, felt presence. The air thickened until each inhale tasted like soot. Rowan's vision blurred at the edges, the hallway bending slightly, as if the building's geometry shifted to make space for whatever was approaching. Halfway to the stairwell, Rowan stopped, not by choice. His legs stiffened, as if the floor had tightened its grip beneath him. Maris reached for him, but her hand froze mid-motion, suspended as though held in invisible resin. Her eyes widened in terror. A pulse traveled through the floor. One beat, then another. The ember ring beneath the Baptistry font was calling. Rowan felt it rise through him, a warmth that should have been painful, but instead felt like a closing hand around his spine. Between breaths, shapes flickered at the edge of his vision. Kneeling forms, ash drifting upward, a circle closing. He whispered, barely audible, "It is choosing." Maris trembled violently as the invisible force pressed against her shoulders. "Rowan, do not answer it." But the pressure inside him thickened. He heard the recorder's voice again, though the device remained silent at his hip. "He is needed." The scraping reached the entryway of the archive. Rowan turned slowly. Something stood in the doorway. Not a figure, not entirely. More like smoke borrowing the outline of a man, its shape trembling as if barely held together. Its center glowed faintly, a pulse of ember light that corresponded exactly to the rhythm beneath the baptistry. He stepped forward. The smoke curled off it with each movement, drifting upward like the remnants of burned parchment. Rowan felt the warmth bloom under his ribs. A presence flooded into him, neither human nor entirely aware of its own boundaries, like an unfinished thought wearing a body for the first time. Maris managed a choked whisper, "You need to move. Now." Rowan did not. The thing paused only a few feet from him, the space between them trembling in a way that made the air ripple. It lifted what resembled a hand, though its fingers wavered like smoke caught in a draft. When it touched Rowan's shoulder, the welt of heat spread instantly through his chest, down his arms, across his vision. For a moment, he saw the baptistry in perfect detail, the soot spirals glowing, the floor pulsing, a kneeling figure of ash, head bowed, lips moving through a prayer that had never been completed. Then he understood. The ritual was not trying to consume him. It was trying to continue through him. His legs moved without command. Maris tried to scream, but no sound left her throat. Rowan walked toward the stairs with the thing drifting beside him, each step syncing with the pulse rising from the church foundations. The hallway warped around them, its stones bending as though welcoming a long-awaited return. By the time Rowan reached the baptistry door, the smoke figure had grown more defined, more anchored. It pushed the door open with a slow, ceremonial grace. Inside, the ember ring beneath the font blazed. Rowan stepped into it. The warmth enveloped him, not burning, but reshaping. His thoughts folded inward. His voice thinned. He mouthed words he did not recognize, but they arrived whole, ancient, inevitable. The smoke figure knelt beside him, Its form brightened until Rowan could see a face hidden within the haze. Eyes hollow with centuries of waiting, the circle pulsed. Maris watched from the hallway, tears streaming silently as the chamber filled with rising ash. Rowan's silhouette flickered, illuminated from within. He turned his head once, slowly, as if hearing her heart, not her voice. Then a whisper drifted from him, soft enough to feel rather than hear. Continuance. The ember ring flared white. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. Rowan was gone. Only a faint dusting of ash remained where he had knelt. The soot spirals on the walls had changed, their lines now complete. The ritual had finished. Yet as Maris backed away, trembling, she heard a faint scrape from beneath the floor. A new pulse, a new rhythm, as if the circle had begun preparing for its next continuation. Before you go, listen closely. Stories like this never end simply because a name disappears into ash. Rituals linger, places remember, and the shadows behind you hold more than silence. If you felt anything watching with you as the tale unfolded, you may want to stay connected. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel, not out of habit, but because some doors close only when enough eyes witness them. And some nightmares need company.